Hello! Howdy! Howdy, neighbor! My name is Emily, and this is my YouTube channel. Today, I am going to be talking about all the books I read in November, which is wild. I feel like literally at the beginning of every video, I'm just like, I can't believe how fast 2024 went by, and it is so true. There's only one more reading wrap-up this year, and then we're on to 2025. This month was rough. All around us. I really dove into reading, I think, for respite, and I read 9 books, which is slightly on the low end for me, but I read a few pretty dense books, so I don't really mind. I've read 99 books this year so far. My goal is 100, so my original goal was 75, and then I upped it to 100, so I hope we'll be surpassing that goal. I'll just get into these books because that's what you guys are all here for. I read 5 out of the 6 books that I picked in my November TBR video, which I'm super proud of. It's hard sometimes to stick to the TBR video books. First, I wanted to start with the first book I read this month, which is A Man Called Ove. I didn't realize that it was pronounced Uva, but I listened to this book on, I think on Libby for free. That's what they said it was in the book. It was a fast-moving character study of this man, Ove, who's this kind of, I guess for lack of a better descriptor, just grumpy old man with a lot more to him than being a grumpy old man. He lives in this little neighborhood. This family moves in with these little girls. For me, one of the themes of this book is actions speak louder than words. You know, he's this grumpy man, but you learn about his past, you learn about him as a boy, you learn about how that affects who he is now, and he's actually quite snug, you really come to find. I gave this 4.5 stars when I read it, although about a month later, I'm not remembering too much detail from it, so I might actually bump that down to a 4, just because I feel like 4.5 a month later, you would remember a lot more. I definitely recommend this one. I think it's a really sweet winter read, and he's just such a character. You really do kind of grow to love this man and his idiosyncrasies, I suppose. I really liked the writing style of this book and the humor in it, so I'm excited to read more by this author. Okay, next I read, which I've had for I think since my birthday almost 2 years ago, Wish You Were Here by Jodi Picoult. This is kind of a fictional, I don't know if historical fiction is the way to describe it, but it's basically a fictionalized tale of this woman who is living through the onset of COVID in March of 2020 and then beyond. I would say if you had a traumatic experience with COVID specifically, you don't have to read this book. I think the reason I waited to read it was because I got this book I think in 2023, and it was still a little too soon for me. I feel now I'm okay, I can read it. It's this young woman, Diana, her boyfriend's a doctor, and they have this trip scheduled to go to the Galapagos, but then COVID breaks out and her boyfriend has to stay behind and save people's lives and stuff, but he's no, you should still go. And she kind of discovers that, oh, he was gonna propose to her on this trip. She goes, and then she kind of gets stuck on this island because the travel restrictions are far more strict than she realized they were going to be. This book is not what I thought it was going to be. It has a bit of a twist in it. I really like the overall message of the book and what it's trying to say. Once the twist happened, I was kind of really clocked in. What I like about this book is you, without giving anything away, you really experience what this character experiences, how her life unfolds. It's almost you feel, I can't talk about this without giving it away, but I just think it's very cleverly written. This is really hard to talk about without spoiling it. It is really interesting, and I think I do recommend this. It's actually I think a pretty good winter read, especially if you live somewhere cold, because you get to go on this island adventure and then it kind of grounds a bit more, I would say. If you read this book, you know why I'm struggling so much. It's not too long. I don't think it's even 300 pages. I listened to part of it and I read part of it with my eyes. Oh, the rating, you ask? Great question. Is it bad that I don't remember what I rate books? I rated it 3.5 stars. It was great, but I'm probably not gonna think about it too much ever again. I said, reading this book at the end of 2024, it's amazing how we can go through a collective trauma and learn nothing from it. I just remember when COVID first hit, I feel we all learned something so viscerally. You know, I feel we really all meditated on what was really meaningful, and I just feel we plowed through that and have just forgotten a lot of that in such a short time afterwards. Anyway, it was a journey. Next came the time to listen to Everything Is by Mark Manson, because it just seemed appropriate at the time, and I was kind of looking for, it says it's a book about hope, And at the time I read this, I was looking for hope or just some sort of perspective on it all. You know what I mean? I wish I gave a little more time before I listened to this book. I might listen to it again because I was just kind of feeling overwhelmed. The main thesis of this book is that like hope and like living in a state of hope is actually not really beneficial to you, because you should be in the present and like appreciate what you have and like where you are, rather than just like consistently hoping for something else. It's kind of a book about acceptance. He just goes into like all of this stuff, very like harrowing histories of like political leaders and stuff. Yeah, it was a lot, but it definitely offered a great perspective. I gave it 3 stars at the time I read it, just because again, like I almost like DNF'd it just because I was like, this is not the right time for me to be reading it. I might read it again and my rating might change, but we'll see. Okay, next I read Butcher and Blackbird, which was on my November TBR. This is about 2 serial killers that kill other serial killers. They meet and they start this game. Who's gonna find the serial killer first and kill them, kind of a thing. Obviously they fall for each other. It was good. I think I said this in, I don't know if it was a reading vlog or what it was. It might have been a reading vlog that I filmed but never posted because I was too depressed. It was one of those books where like 3/4 through, I am not wondering what's going to happen. There's definitely a twist that was interesting that I actually called early on. I wasn't like on the edge of my seat the whole time. I kind of knew like, oh, okay, they're gonna kill the serial killers. It might be a little bit of a struggle, obviously, but they're the main characters, so they're not gonna die. I wasn't like completely riveted by the structure until the end. Having to wait till the end to like be like, what's gonna happen, you know, is not completely ideal. I gave it 3 stars. I would definitely recommend it still. I wish that we went more into why these characters are the way they are and like their histories. I think that would have provided a lot more depth and made me care about them more. You scratched the surface of it, and this is a trilogy, so there are 2 other books after this that might go into it more, but I would just appreciate kind of having a little bit more backstory from the get-go. I really would have like had more stake in caring about these characters if I knew more about them and their history and why they are the way they are. I'm probably not going to continue the series. I don't regret reading it. Like, it was fun, but I think this is enough for me. And it was also like grotesque in a lot of places. I couldn't eat while I was reading this book because they're like serial killers and they have very weird methods of killing people. Next, I read another book I've had for a while. I got from Book of the Month in November of 2022. It's called We Are the Light. This was such a wild journey to go on reading this book. I really appreciated the way it was written. It's written through these letters of this guy to his basically therapist who he's not seeing anymore and like who won't respond to him. Him and the rest of his town has gone through a tragedy. His wife is dead, but he like still sees her in the form of an angel, and it's definitely an unreliable narrator trope. This is by the same author of Silver Linings Playbook. I don't know exactly. I think he has PTSD, this character. I'm not exactly sure what the diagnosis was. He definitely has something going on. You learn more about the nature of like what he's writing and why he's writing it. It was really interesting because you don't know what the tragedy was right at first. Like, it definitely all kind of unfolds, and I really enjoyed that. Having said that, again, like, this month was not the most joyous month, and this book is not the most joyous book. So I gave it 3 stars just for me personally. I read this book probably 2.5 weeks ago. I already forget some of the details, so I don't think I cared too much about the characters. Like, I wasn't that attached to them. It was definitely well written. It's a short book. It's like 230 pages. So if you like unreliable narrators and dramatic irony, actually, I don't know if that's dramatic irony. I think it's the opposite of dramatic irony, where like the characters know stuff that you don't know and it kind of like unfolds. This is a really cool book to read. Next, I finally read Secret History by Donna Tartt. So this is about this boy who goes to this school and finds himself in this elitist like Greek class with a few select other students that come from definitely more privileged background than he does. They're hiding something, like they have a secret history. I watched this video after I read this, and it was like this classics student, she broke down all of the references to classic like Greek literature and stuff that are intertwined throughout this book, and I thought that was really interesting. Obviously, it's so well written. Donna Tartt's amazing. I did give it 5 stars, kind of like out of obligation, just because it is such a great book, and I do think it's very influential. It's kind of like a blueprint, and I really love, again, like told from the main character's perspective. So I really love books where you get this character's perspective on this group of people people, which isn't necessarily, obviously it's not the objective perspective of what's going on as it ever is first person, but like in this situation, it's just so warped because he's so put under these sort of spells of these people. It's really interesting reading it from his point of view, and it's harrowing. Harrowing. I'm glad I finally read it. Personally, like, I'd give it a 4. I don't like think about these characters that much, but I do remember them. They'll always be in the back of my head somewhere. But I am giving it 5 stars because it is just objectively a brilliant book. Does that make sense? If you haven't read this, like, you really should read it. I was really expecting it to be kind of like inaccessible the way it was written. Like, I was expecting it to be very dense and very intellectual and kind of like I really had to like sit down and like read each word very slowly kind of a thing. It wasn't that way. It was very easy to read. This is why I took so long to read it. Like, I've had it for a very long time. If you think that that's what this book is going to be like, it's not. Like, the typeface is just so like, oh my gosh, please don't make me read this. But I promise it's very easy to read and it flows and it's great. Donna Tartt is an accessible queen. Okay, next oh my gosh, so good. Next I read Saving Six. I don't know what is on my Kindle. This is the 3rd book, yes, in the Boys of Tommen series. This was the first book from that series that I read with my eyes. The first 2 I listened to, which was, I think, really beneficial because the characters don't have, like, my native accent. I think there are some cultural and, like, emotional bits that you get when you listen to it. It's based in Cork, Ireland. Having listened to the first 2, I felt like I kind of, like, understood that going into this one. This is about, I don't really know how to, like, describe this. It is a romance, but it has a lot of darkness to it. It has a lot more depth to the story. Like, it's not just a romance. And if you read the first 2 books, like, you understand that. The first 2 books center around Shannon, this character Shannon, and then this book is her brother Joey, and then the next book is also her brother Joey, which I'm gonna read this month. This series is so amazing. I can't really say what it's about without like spoiling it. They're all high schoolers, but it definitely doesn't feel that way sometimes just because it's pretty like mature content. The first 2 were 5 stars. This one is 5 stars. If you have not read the series yet and you check the content warnings and stuff, and if you can read it, like, I highly recommend this. I think I prefer this actually to the Magnolia Parks series, which has some similarities to it, but which is saying a lot because I really like that series. This is really up there for me. These characters are really starting to live in my head rent free. Like, I think about even like the supporting characters and like their parents and stuff. Like, I think about them a lot. It's killing me, actually. I really highly recommend the series. The books are longer, but it doesn't feel like it because they're so well written. Very fast paced. The next book I listened to was Cher, the Memoir, Part 1. If you know me, most of you don't really know me that well personally, but I love Cher. Cher is like one of my personal heroes, as she is to many people. And so when her memoir came out, I was like, and I knew she narrates it with Stephanie J. Block, who I'm also a Broadway baby. Stephanie J. Block is a huge Broadway star, and she won a Tony actually for playing Cher in the Cher show on Broadway. She co-narrates it with her. I don't rate memoirs just because that feels wrong. I would give this 5 stars though, if I did. You know, Cher came from nothing, like, and her mom came from even less. She spent the first few years of her life, like, in a Catholic orphanage. The trials and tribulations, like, her mother and her, like, went through are just insane. I do think celebrities and, you know, better known artists that live in the public sphere from her generation, you get a lot more people that come from not necessarily that intense of a background, but a lot more people who are like self-made and come from like parents who are not in the business and like don't have trust funds. And I really am starting to feel like with my generation and younger generations, the only people who are making art now are people who come from money or have family in the business, which probably means they come from money. And I think the art really suffers. Like, I think what we're seeing is just not as interesting in general because we're only getting like the life experiences of people that have had a certain life experience, and that's fine. Like, I don't think that you shouldn't make stuff, you know, be an artist if you come from money by any means. I'm just saying I think it's really oversaturated right now with artists who have parents in the industry or just come from money. I think the wealth gap is growing and it's getting progressively harder to sustain pursuing art and, you know, taking care of yourself as time goes on. I digress. It was just reading Cher's story and, you know, seeing who she is now and who she's become. You know, she's always going to be that girl that had that experience and who came from nothing. And I think it really just shows, and I have a lot of respect for her. You understand that she has this like tough exterior, but at least through this part of the memoir, which was kind of through I think her relationship with Greg Allman, so you get all of like the Sonny and Cher bits, you realize like she didn't have a lot of control over her life. Like she was very scared. She came across as very strong, but that is like a persona, and you know the experiences that she went through were I think very different and very, very much like what you might not expect. It was wonderfully written. I would definitely listen to it. Having the person who wrote the memoir, like having the person the memoir is about, narrating it is just gives you so much more insight, I think, into the story. I love Cher. I love her music. I think she's incredible. I love all of her music, and she has really done like every single genre well. I think she's had a #1 hit in like every decade since the 60s, and I don't think anyone else has done that. Don't quote me on that, but she's just an icon. Like she's just an icon. She was the first person to use auto-tune as like an effect in her song Believe, which she released when she was 50. She is just such a like the epitome of like what I want to be as I get older. I feel like she's always looking for ways to innovate and reinvent herself. You know, she's almost 80 years old and she is not stopping at all. I've seen her perform live. She's so good. She still sings so well and dances and wears these like hot outfits. Like she's just amazing. So anyway, if you love Cher as much as I do, read this book. And if you don't know Cher as well as I do, on the close personal level that I know Cher, I would definitely like check out her music. She's also an amazing actor, which this part 1 doesn't get into really that yet. But I think she's one of the great actors. I love her in Silkwood and Moonstruck and Mermaids. I love Mermaids. It's so good. And Burlesque. We all knew I was going to talk about that one the most. Last and finally, we have The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is my second Kristen Hanna book. The first one I think I gave 5 stars. It was 4 wins. So this is about 2 sisters that are living in, it doesn't start out as German-occupied France, but definitely ends up there. One of the sisters has a daughter, one does not. And it kind of just explores a lot of different things, but something that was interesting to me is like the complexities of war and like the circumstances that they were both in and the choices that they both made. I think it's really easy to say like, oh, I would have done X, Y, and Z if I were in this person's position, but like you really don't know what you would do. And I just really appreciated the ways in which these characters make mistakes and don't necessarily do the right thing, but do the thing that like you would probably do. You understand that like you would probably do it too, the way that Kristen Hanna writes this book. It's mainly in France in like the 1940s that it takes place, but it does go back and forth a bit to Oregon in 1995, where you kind of have this like unnamed older woman having her own little separate storyline. It's kind of like, who is it? Who is she in the 1940s pages and all that stuff. Really harrowing stuff. Whenever I read books about war and the Holocaust, like it just makes you feel like so grateful for the stupid little problems that you have. Always puts things into perspective, and it's really scary. Like it's really scary how such a large group of people followed orders to kill so many people and treat so many people so unimaginably horrifically. How does this happen? Like, how does this happen? How do people let this happen? Probably not the best book to read, like, right now, like, for my mental health. But I'm so glad I did. I gave it 5 stars. I mean, it was beautifully written. I know it was originally supposed to be a movie with the Fanning sisters, Dakota and Elle. Love them both. Definitely not the vibe I pictured. So maybe I'll go with somebody else, because I think it was, like, shelved or something. Anyway, so those are the 9 books I read in November. Let me know if you've read any of them and what you think. I'm very excited for my December reading and my December list. I hope you guys had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I'll talk to you soon. See you in the next one.